Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this October 19th, 2016 day in our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on First Amendment. They also play the show at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. And if you can't get it there, go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com. That's arcticbeacon.com. And you can get shows going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order and all its tentacles. And today, Wednesday, is part 3 of a series. This should be the last part. And I'm playing an old documentary. This documentary was done over 10 years ago. And it's amazing to me. It's got very few hits, if you think about it. It's amazing to me that people won't go back to this during this election and really look at what the Clintons are all about. Now, I've lived with them most of my life. And I'm playing this primarily for younger listeners, those of you who may be 10, 15, 20, 30 years younger that are just getting your feet wet in America. And I'm not doing it to sway anybody to vote one way or the other, because personally I think it's a selection, not an election. Secondly, we don't really have any choices here. Whichever way it goes, you can bet the Jesuits have their butts covered. And they do it through what's called the Hegelian dialectic. So the left and the right actually play a part, but they do it kind of as adversaries, but yet the synthesis always is what the Jesuits do want, because they do control our U.S. domestic and foreign policies. And that's what we cover on this show. But because we're in the heat of this election, I thought it'd be interesting for people to realize the crime cartel behind the Clintons, and also how it seeps into the Republican establishment as well. So, let's get back to this. I just got enough time to finish it today, so I don't want to keep talking the whole show here. So let me get this up for you so that we can finish this, and this will give you a little bit idea. I think we're at a point now. We were talking about Ron Brown and the plane crash, but it gets good here in the last 30 minutes or 40 minutes of this documentary. So here we go.
Several personnel were present while Colonel Gormley was conducting his external examination.
Oh, well, we lost it there for some reason, and we will get it back. We lost the connection.
It's true, I did the dumb thing.
Here it is. See, we lost it. Oh no, they play these stupid commercials.
Today I'm announcing
Okay, so here we go.
Photographer present was Chief Petty Officer Kathleen Janoski, a 22-year veteran.
I opened up my big mouth in the morgue and said, "Wow, look at the hole in Ron Brown's head. It looks like a bullet hole." I said that, and my life has never been the same since.
All of the X-ray films of Brown's head have disappeared. There were allegedly many photos taken of Brown that were stored in a safe, but these photos, along with the negatives, have also disappeared. All that remains of the head X-rays are photographic slide images taken by Janowski. Dr. Cyril Wecht has nearly 40 years of experience, has conducted some 13,000 autopsies, and is considered one of the nation's most prominent forensic pathologists. He is also prominent in Democratic Party politics. He says there was more than enough evidence to suggest a possible homicide in the death of Ron Brown, and an autopsy should have been conducted on his body. As he stated, quote, "It's not even arguable in the field of medical legal investigations whether an autopsy should have been conducted on Ron Brown," unquote. And Lieutenant Colonel Cogswell stated, quote, "You can't ignore who this person is. To stack up the coincidences, one of 35 people has got a hole in their head. The hole is dead center in the top of their head, and it just happens to be the most important person on the plane from a political point of view. That's a whole lot of reason to investigate it," unquote. In late 1993, the White House Office of Personal Security headed by Craig Livingstone, illegally obtained from the FBI the confidential background files on more than 900 Bush administration officials and other perceived enemies of President Clinton. At the request of Hillary Clinton, the files were to be uploaded onto White House computers so that sensitive information could be shared with the Democratic National Committee. These files contain all allegations, rumors, or statements made about the individual during FBI background checks, whether or not confirmed, true, or even credible. Livingstone had a history of prior drug use, which should have disqualified him from serving in the White House. However, senior White House counsel William Kennedy III said that Livingstone was hired on orders from the First Lady. Other evidence indicates that this illegal activity was likely approved by President Clinton. Congressman Bob Barr comments on this frightening scenario.
Chuck Colson, who is now a born-again Christian and a prominent speaker on prison reform and religion in America, went to federal prison, went to jail because he misused a single government law enforcement file. Yet we now know that the Clinton administration misused perhaps upwards of 1,000 or more FBI files, which include and contain very sensitive information on average American citizens. I think clearly what the Clinton administration is trying to do is an orchestrated, systematic effort to thwart justice, to thwart the rule of law, to thwart legitimate investigations by the Congress, whether it's impeachment proceedings or regular oversight. They're clearly designed, as they are, with going after Kenneth Starr, the independent counsel, and other independent counsels, trying to derail investigations. They're trying to derail prosecutions. It is very well orchestrated, and I'm sorry to say, in some degree, it is succeeding. But these are not isolated incidents that we're seeing with the compilation of enemies lists, enemies files, FBI files. It is systematic. It is abusive. I believe it is illegal. And it is very frightening because this is precisely the sort of stuff, except on a much larger scale, that forced President Nixon from office a generation ago.
Who was the biggest contributor to the Clinton-Gore ticket in 1992? Not a corporation, not a labor union, not a Hollywood mogul, but Indonesian businessman James Riyadi, who gave $450,000 to elect Bill Clinton. The Riyadis and their executives gave an additional $600,000 to the Democratic National Committee and Democratic state parties. The Riyadis' corporate flagship is the Lippo Group, a multi-billion-dollar financial conglomerate with business ties to China's communist government. The patriarch of the business empire, Mokhtar Riyadi, and all three of his sons have fled the country. In 1977, Mokhtar Riyadi became partners in one of America's largest investment banks, Stevens Incorporated in Little Rock, Arkansas. His son, James Riyadi, interned there and soon began a friendship with Arkansas Attorney General Bill Clinton. Thus began a friendship that has lasted 20 years and has spread a web of intrigue, financial corruption, and foreign influence into American government. In return for their generosity, the Riyadis and their friends were given unparalleled access to the White House. On the afternoon of April 19, 1993, 80 members of the Branch Davidian religious cult were holed up in their compound outside Waco, Texas. On that same day, James Riyadi, John Huang, and other Chinese officials were visiting President Clinton in the Oval Office. The television in the corner showed CNN's live coverage of the burning compound, as 17 American children were dying in a burning inferno. But the president took time out to give his visitors a tour of the White House. In their book, Year of the Rat, Edward Timberlake and William Triplett have connected the dots between the Clinton White House and the Communist Chinese. Some examples are as follows. The Riyadi family, with connections to Communist China's KGB, became the largest contributor to the Clinton-Gore campaign in 1992. Communist agents and representatives of Chinese organized crime were granted extraordinary access to the White House. They had targeted Bill Clinton 15 years earlier when he was an obscure politician in Arkansas. America's defense and foreign policy have been twisted to benefit Clinton and Gore foreign backers, including the Chinese military. Nearly 100 witnesses have either fled the country or taken the Fifth Amendment. William C. Triplett II is the former chief counsel to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He has 30 years of experience working on China and national security. We asked him about the Riyadi family.
They tried to come into the United States in the late 70s in Georgia. That didn't work out. Ultimately, they ended up in Little Rock. And in Little Rock, in the late 70s, the heir apparent to the family fortune met Mr. Clinton when he was then Attorney General of Arkansas, and there have been perhaps 20 years worth of friendship from that. Their man in the United States was a man named John Huang, who was also ethnic Chinese from Taiwan, and he joined them overseas. And he looked after their business interests here and also their campaign contributions. He was in charge of writing the checks and making sure that it happened. In 1992, Mr. Clinton, in the spring, was in trouble. It had been discovered that he was a draft dodger. The Jennifer Flowers business had come out, and he was out of money for the New York primary. What happened then was that the Riyadi family has a bank in Arkansas that they could influence, and the bank gave loaned $3.5 million to the Clinton campaign, and that was enough to get him the nomination. So I think one could say that they were instrumental in getting him the nomination and the election in 1992.
It's really quite outrageous for a dollar that an American citizen provides to a candidate or a party of their choice being neutralized by a dollar coming in a million times over from a foreign source, not just a foreign source, but a foreign adversarial source, namely Communist China.
The Riyadi family is not a public charity. They wanted something for their money. So after Bill Clinton got elected, they sent a letter to Bruce Lindsay, who was in charge of personnel in the Clinton administration, saying that they had invested in Mr. Clinton. What they wanted was for their man, John Huang, to be moved into the American government, and they succeeded. In January 1994, Huang, who had been the area manager for Riyadi's bank in Little Rock, received a top-secret security clearance for his new job at the Commerce Department. According to phone records, Huang made over 400 calls to various parts of the Riyadi and Lippo Empire. 170 calls were to Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Red China. CIA agents have testified that they gave Huang 37 classified one-on-one briefings in his office at Commerce. They estimate that he could have seen as many as 550 pieces of American intelligence. Huang later went to work for the Democratic National Committee, where he would have normally lost his security clearance. But much pressure was put on Assistant Commerce Secretary Charles Meissner, and Huang was able to keep his security clearance. Charles Meissner later died in the same plane crash that killed Ron Brown. One official said, "A lot of secrets died with Chuck Meissner." We now know that during the 1996 campaign, John Huang was actively seeking campaign funds for Bill Clinton from Asian sources, who have ties to organized criminal syndicates, narcotics trafficking, gambling, prostitution, and Communist China's intelligence services. During this same period, he had access to highly classified information. Lieutenant Colonel Liu Chaoying is the daughter of General Liu Huiqing, China's premier PLA officer and an old revolutionary communist soldier. She also studied Marxism-Leninism at the Chinese People's University in Beijing, a major training center for the future Communist Party officials. Colonel Liu is a communist. She is a high-tech spy. She was an official of 2 red Chinese companies that deal in arms trafficking.
She ran at least tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars through Johnny Chung into the Democratic National Committee, and she met Clinton twice at fundraisers.
According to FBI Director Louis Freeh, Chinese criminal gangs called triads have emerged as a significant and violent force in the United States, committing contract murders, extortion, drug trafficking, kidnapping, prostitution, weapon smuggling, and money laundering. The triads have been guests of the Clinton White House many times and have made illegal contributions to the Clinton-Gore re-election campaign. Neg Lap Singh is a Macau criminal syndicate figure who visited the White House on many occasions. He attended a number of fundraisers and even sat next to the president at some of them. Neg Lap Singh and others are partners in Angdu International of Thailand, a firm that procures Thai women, many of them underage, for prostitution. In May 1996, these men were honored guests at a Clinton fundraiser.
Charlie Tree is another person from Taiwan. He grew up in a rough neighborhood that is the breeding ground for a criminal element called triads. He came to the United States to work in the kitchen of his sister's Chinese restaurant in Little Rock. Became friends with Mr. Clinton when he was an Arkansas official, and so forth and so on. And when he became the president, he used that to exploit his business interests. He became a friend of a man from Macau, and we think they both became connected through Chinese gangster connections. And the man from Macau became in essence, his sponsor and sugar daddy, if you will. The man from Macau is in the business of exploiting women for prostitution. He owns a hotel in Macau that is a brothel, and with two other men, he owns a separate company that procures Thai women for prostitution in Macau.
Charlie Tree had been in Little Rock since the late 1970s and had known the Clintons for almost as long. Thus, he was the perfect triad messenger and agent in place for the People's Republic of China, ready to be reactivated without suspicion. As the Canadian study of triad behavior points out, once a triad, always a triad. For the past 50 years, the United States has guaranteed Taiwan's independence against Communist China's threat of forcible reunification. In March 1996, Taiwan, or the Republic of China, was preparing for a national ritual that the People's Republic of China despises. The ritual is called elections. When Taiwan's elections proceeded on schedule, the People's Liberation Army launched several of its intermediate-range ballistic missiles by firing them into the Pacific just off the north and south ends of the island. Clinton then sent battle groups from the 7th Fleet, including its two largest aircraft carriers, the Independence and the Nimitz, into the Taiwan Straits. This time, Clinton did the right thing. After this incident, two things happened. First, a top Chinese official in Beijing intimated to the U.S. Embassy that an attack against Los Angeles would be in the prospects if the United States interfered in Communist China's campaign of intimidation against Taiwan. But the Red Chinese government also tried a second channel. They sent Charlie Tree carrying a letter and a bag of money. On the morning of March 21st, 1996, Tree dropped off several $100,000 to the President and the First Lady's favorite charity, the Presidential Legal Defense Trust. On the same day, Tree also delivered to the White House a letter about the situation in Taiwan. Excerpts from the letter are as follows. Once the hard parties of the Chinese military inclined to grasp U.S. involvement as foreign intervention, is U.S. ready to face such challenge? It is highly possible for China to launch real war. I hope the President will carefully consider these issues and make the decisions that are beneficial to the U.S., China, and Taiwan altogether. President Clinton's reply letter read, The redeployment of the Independents and the Nimitz was intended as a signal to both Taiwan and the PRC that the United States was concerned about maintaining stability in the Taiwan Strait region. It was not intended as a threat to the PRC. This letter was a complete sellout of Taiwan. Clinton, in effect, was saying that his administration would no longer be prepared to deter Beijing from any menacing actions it may take toward Taiwan. Bill Clinton had caved in the face of pressure from Beijing, by a letter that was not delivered through public or diplomatic channels, but by a man whose previous experience was a member of a notorious triad gang, a fry cook from a Chinese restaurant in Little Rock, who was under indictment for violating election laws.
Just overlook what the Chinese government did at Tiananmen Square and give them most favored nation status.
On June 4th, 1989, Chinese tanks and armored personnel carriers rolled into Tiananmen Square to confront pro-democracy students from 4 of Beijing's most prestigious universities. The students were unarmed and practitioners of nonviolence. When it was over, some 4,000 to 6,000 people lay dead in the streets of Beijing.
We know who did it. We know the names of the Chinese units. We know their commanding officers. We know everyone. And the reason we know is because NATO's military attachés had spread all over the city that night, and they were reporting from all ports of the city. And we know who the commanders of the Chinese units were and what they did that night. And they killed the Chinese young people, and they knew what they were doing, and they did it anyway.
Congress reacted immediately, forcing President Bush to cut off all military exchanges with the PLA. This policy stood for the next 4 years.
As soon as President Clinton was elected, that policy was reversed. And so, as near as we can tell, every Chinese general who was personally involved in killing Chinese young people has been to the United States and received the royal treatment. Now, typically, how this works is as follows. The Chinese general comes here in secret, goes to the Pentagon, gets a 19-gun honor guard salute. He will go to the White House, meet with the president in the Oval Office for discussions. Then he will be taken to American military bases to learn things about the military that we think they should not, and then he goes home. And we're talking somewhere between a dozen and 2 dozen generals.
The Clinton administration has shown senior PLA officers our most modern military facilities, shown PLA a Marine amphibious landing exercise, shown them around our latest guided missile cruiser, given the PLA Chief of Staff a tour of our military command center in the Pacific, escorted the PLA Chief of Staff around an American nuclear attack submarine.
General.
Okay, we're going to take a break, come back. We got about 20 or 30 minutes, no, about 22 minutes left on this, and the ending is very good. So make sure you come back, and make sure you go to this old documentary. And I say old because, you know, the American mindset goes back about 10 seconds, and everything seems to be forgotten before that. Let's see. Why don't we go back and play this again in about, let me take a 3-minute break, and then we'll come back with the Bill and Hillary Clinton complete body count. And that was 10 years ago. It's gotten much bigger as the years go on, and I played that a couple weeks ago. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of the Investigative Journal, and we're about 19 minutes away from finishing this old documentary and giving you a backdrop of what the Clintons are really all about. The point is, you can go over particulars to your head spins, but if you don't understand where it comes from, who the enemy really is, what the overall big picture is, then you get lost in the weeds. You get lost in the forest. So let me straighten it out for you. You can look at what the Clintons were doing to give Chinese insiders influence to our military secrets. At the time, China, what their military capabilities and their intellectual property ideas compared to ours were minimal. So Clinton opens the door for the Chinese to get a lot of our secrets. And look at where China is today. That was with the help of course, us. Now, if you really think about it, where does it all come from? Now, we understand that the elite or the Vatican or this global idea of globalism, which means a one world order, one world government, one world religion, is their end game. Now, I've said a long time ago, all roads lead to Rome. And the only way this can happen is if the leaders of all of the countries, whether they're adversarial or whether they're friendly, have to be infected with Jesuitism. So we're looking at a world at the top that tells their people one thing, but behind the scenes there's a hidden agenda, and that hidden agenda is globalism. So that's what they're moving towards. Now, can it be stopped? It can be slowed down, and our election is a perfect example of it right now. In the end, they will. get their way. And you're going to see conflicts all over the world, order out of chaos. So if all the leaders of the world, the major ones, are controlled from somebody at the top, i.e. Rome, the elite, etc., it makes it difficult for Americans who have no idea of this to really understand it. What I mean is, we can see right here, if you get one thing out of this documentary, you can see the criminality, the way these people operate, the way the Clintons operate. And what it tells you is that they are beholden not to the United States, but they're beholden to another power above them, and that is Rome and the Antichrist. And when you get that, you can understand how this works out. But also, it makes the particulars that we talk about have a meaning, really mean something. So let's get back and finish it up, and then tomorrow we'll get on to bigger and better things. Here we go.
Chu was in tactical control the night of the massacre, and he is the one who gave the order to the troops, mount up and move out. He is the man who, in fact, was the closest we could point to ordering the massacre of the MP.
On the day of the Tiananmen massacre, General Xu shoulders more responsibility for the deaths of his countrymen than any other Chinese officer. Under his orders, children as young as 3 years of age died from PLA gunfire. Upon his arrival at the Pentagon, General Xu received a 19-gun salute. Defense Secretary Perry told General Xu that his visit had great symbolic significance. Perry pledged to brief the PLA on U.S. strategy and plans for the years ahead. The American taxpayers paid $13,200 for General Xu and his party to have a 4-day visit to Hawaii. The China Ocean Shipping Company, otherwise known as COSCO, is a merchant marine that is essentially a naval arm of the People's Liberation Army. It is also a major arms supplier to dictators and to terrorists. In 1996, a COSCO ship called the Empress Phoenix sailed into the port of Oakland, California, carrying 2,000 automatic weapons that were destined for Los Angeles street gangs. The chairman of one of the two Chinese arms companies implicated in this scheme later had coffee at the White House. The naval station in Long Beach, California closed in 1991, but it did not remain unoccupied. A Marine Reserve training center that had been destroyed by an earthquake was allowed space there. But COSCO also wanted the naval station. So in November 1996, the White House placed a series of phone calls to Long Beach officials. The Clinton administration made it clear that leasing the port to COSCO was their preference. In the end, the United States Marines lost their space, and Communist China's COSCO, with the help of Bill Clinton, got what they had lobbied for. They got control of the naval station at Long Beach.
Johnny Chung is a Taiwanese businessman, lives in Southern California. Probably a little bit better than some of the rest of this crowd that shows up in this little drama. We think marginally better. He was trying to promote his business interests, and he was pretty honest about how he saw things. For example, he's famous for saying that the White House is just like a turnstile in a subway. You have to put coins in to pass the gate. And he put a lot of coins in, something in the order of several hundred thousands of dollars. In fact, he dropped a $50,000 check on the First Lady's chief of staff one time when he was visiting. Depending on what records you used, he went in and out of the White House 50 to 60 times, something like that. And the question then is, where did the money come from that he was donating to the Democratic National Committee? And we believe that a lot of the money he was donating came from Chinese military intelligence sources.
Johnny Chung went to Hillary Clinton with a number of requests for Chinese officials. A meeting with President Clinton, a tour of the White House, lunch at the White House, a photo opportunity with the First Lady, an invitation to attend the President's radio address. Every request was granted, and on March 11, 1995, Johnny Chung, with his communist Chinese friends, attended President Clinton's weekly radio address. It all fell into place after Chung handed a check for $50,000 made out to the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, to Hillary's Chief of Staff, Maggie Williams, following a March 9th photo opportunity with the First Lady. Two photographs in particular speak volumes about the deals this White House has cut. The first shows President Clinton and the First Lady with Macau criminal syndicate figure Neglap Seng. The second photo was taken at the Sai Lai Buddhist Temple and shows Vice President Gore with Ted Sioing. It's important to recall that both men are in the business of exploiting Asian women for prostitution. Many of these women are underage and are sold into slavery by their poverty-stricken families. Often they are encouraged to develop narcotic habits in order to keep them dependent. Who would have guessed that Bill Clinton and Al Gore would literally sit down to dinner with these men in exchange for millions of dollars in illegal donations, much of the money coming from their prostitution rings?
The evidence clearly establishes that important technology, missile technology, computer technology, and probably in the near future, nuclear technology, has been and will be made available to the government of Communist China. This will have, I believe, and already has begun to have very serious, devastating consequences for us and perhaps some of our allies. For example, the Communist Chinese Long March rocket, which never marched very long because it kept blowing up. Their decoupling systems were inadequate. Their guidance systems were inadequate. So they did not pose as serious a threat as they otherwise would to the United States of America. Now, as a result of decisions by the Clinton administration to relax export controls and based on actions by certain U.S. companies who put the almighty dollar ahead of our national security and the national security of this country and our citizens, Communist China now has been able to remedy the problems with their long-range rockets, those that would be targeted at the United States or that are used to launch satellites into orbit. They now have been able to solve the decoupling problems and the guidance problems, so they pose, one, a direct danger to this country because we've enhanced the capability of the Communist Chinese government to launch successfully missiles at the United States and to place into orbit spy satellites. Moreover, that technology is now, we already know, finding its way to third countries that are adversarial to us as well, such as Iran. Thirdly, from a commercial standpoint, by virtue of our enhancing the ability of the Communist Chinese to develop more successful and reliable launch vehicles, we're undercutting our own aerospace industry. So we're hurting ourselves not only from a national security standpoint, but from a commercial standpoint as well. This poses a direct threat to the national security of the United States of America and our allies.
The following are a few of the many casualties of those having knowledge or involvement in one or more of the Clinton scandals. In order to save time, only a partial list is shown. July 1978, Susan Coleman allegedly became pregnant after having an affair with Clinton, a problem which threatened to disrupt Clinton's election bid. She committed suicide by shooting herself in the back of the head. August 1991. Danny Casoloro was a reporter who investigated various scandals in Arkansas, including Clinton's Arkansas Development and Finance Authority and MENA. He had warned his family that his life was in danger, and if he were found dead of an apparent accident or suicide, not to believe it. Casoloro was found dead in a bathtub in a West Virginia hotel room with his wrist slit. His death was ruled a suicide. July 1992. C. Victor Razor II was a national finance co-chairman of Clinton's presidential campaign, who died in a plane crash near Anchorage, Alaska. With his inside knowledge of the Clinton administration, he allegedly had become disillusioned by what he had seen and thus became a potential liability. His son Montgomery also died in the same crash. Herschel Friday was a member of Victor Razor's campaign finance committee. Although he was a top-notch pilot, he died a year and a half later when his plane crashed and exploded as it approached the runway. His death was ruled an accident. September 1992, Paul Tully, Democratic National Committee political director, was a friend and trusted advisor of Clinton's. He was found dead due to unknown causes in his hotel room. December 1992, Paula Gober was a speech interpreter and had traveled with Clinton extensively from 1978 until her death. She died in a car accident. December 1992, Jim Wilhite was an associate of Mac McLarty's former firm. He had called McLarty just hours before dying in a skiing accident. January 1993, Ed Cawley, a former Clinton campaign finance chairman in Arkansas, was found dead in a hotel room. May 1993, John Wilson, a Washington, D.C. city councilman, had decided to come forward with inside knowledge he possessed regarding Whitewater. Wilson was found hanged. His death was ruled a suicide. June 1993, Paul Wiltshire, a Washington, D.C. attorney, wrote a 105-page letter to Attorney General Janet Reno describing evidence he had concerning drug and gun running out of Mena, Arkansas. On the first page of his letter, he stated, quote, "The lives of key participants, other witnesses, and even myself are now in grave danger as a result of my passing this information on to you. If you let this information fall into the hands of the wrong persons, some or all of those who know the truth could well be silenced in the very near future," unquote. Wiltshire was found dead in his apartment. The coroner did not rule on the cause of death. August 1993, John Walker was a senior investigator for the Resolution Trust Corporation. He was looking for information concerning a $50 million transfer from an RTC fund in Chicago to Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan to cover up a $47 million embezzlement scheme that included Whitewater and the Clintons. Walker mysteriously fell to his death from an apartment balcony. His death was ruled a suicide. September 1993, Dr. Stanley Hurd was a longtime friend and family physician of the Clintons and was chairman of Hillary's Health Reform Committee. He was killed in a plane crash only a few days after Stephen Dixon, the attorney for the Health Reform Committee, had been killed in the crash of his own light plane. March 1994, Dr. Donald Rogers, the Clintons' dentist, was traveling to meet London Sunday Telegraph reporter Ambrose Evans Pritchard with information on the Clinton scandals. Rogers and his pilot were killed when their twin-engine Cessna crashed in clear weather near Lawton, Oklahoma. Their deaths were ruled an accident. May 1994, Gandy Baugh, Dan Lassiter's attorney, committed suicide by jumping out of the window of a tall building. His partner committed suicide 1 month later. June 1994, Stanley Huggins was a partner in a Memphis law firm who investigated the dealings of Madison Guarantee Savings and Loan. He produced a 300-page report that has never been made public. Huggins was found dead, reportedly of viral pneumonia. July 1994, Calvin Walraven was a 24-year-old police informant. He testified for the prosecution against Kevin Elders, son of Surgeon General Jocelyn Elders, which resulted in the conviction of Mr. Elders for drug trafficking. A few days later, after the trial, Mr. Walraven was found with a gunshot wound to the head. His death was ruled a suicide. October 1994, Florence Martin was an accountant who allegedly had documents as well as the PIN number to an account that had been set up in the name of Barry Seal for $1.46 million at the Fuji Bank in the Cayman Islands. Martin was found dead of 3 gunshot wounds to the head. November 1996. Barbara Wise was a Commerce Department staffer. She was found dead in her locked office at the Department of Commerce, partially nude and covered with bruises. In their scramble to secure and maintain power, Bill Clinton and Al Gore have left a legacy of corruption, making unscrupulous bargains for campaign cash, selling out our national security, losing our nation's technical edge, catering to red Chinese agents, arms smugglers, and gangsters, and enabling the People's Republic of China intelligence to penetrate our political and defense establishments. The damage they have done is deep, but there is perhaps a treatment for this cancer that has befallen this nation. Wall Street Journal contributing editor Mark Helbrin described President Clinton as, quote, the most corrupt, fraudulent, and dishonest president we have ever known, unquote. His remedy? One word will do justice. One word. Impeach.
Impeach now! Impeach now! Impeach now!
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Impeach now!
The United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, lists the following as impeachable offenses: treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Therefore, on December 19, 1998, the United States House of Representatives voted on articles of impeachment against William Jefferson Clinton. He was found guilty of providing perjurious, false, and misleading testimony to the grand jury, and he prevented, obstructed, and impeded the administration of justice.
Carried by direction of the House of Representatives, and pursuant to House Resolution 614, I hereby deliver these articles of impeachment. Would you hold this?
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons are commanded to keep silent on pain of imprisonment while the House of Representatives is exhibiting to the Senate of the United States articles of impeachment against William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States.
William Jefferson Clinton, by such conduct, warrants impeachment and trial and removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States.
Bill Clinton has become just the second president in U.S. history to be impeached. The evidence is overwhelming that Mr. Clinton has committed serious crimes against the people and government of the United States. Crimes such as accepting bribes from such shady figures as the Red Chinese military, organized crime kingpins, and internationally wanted thieves in exchange for U.S. governmental support for their schemes. Obstructing justice by withholding key evidence, encouraging others to lie under oath, and arranging for others to receive payoffs in exchange for their silence. Aiding foreign powers considered to be enemies of the United States by giving them access to top-secret information, restricted military armaments, and a safe haven on U.S. soil, all in exchange for large campaign contributions.
Okay, the question really has to be asked. Well, let me get it straight here. What happened? The Senate did not vote to impeach Clinton, so he remained in power. They didn't get the 2/3 vote needed. Tells you a little bit about the corruption on both sides of the aisle. Secondly, what's happening now is we're putting the same people back in the White House. You don't think Hillary Clinton was behind exactly everything that Clinton was doing? All they're doing is reversing roles. What a punishment. And thirdly, think about this. A guy who has been proven to do this, against his country, after he became president, received all the benefits, gets speaking engagements upwards of $250,000 to $300,000 for an hour. What kind of punishment is that? The real problem, I think, is that you're seeing, as Tupper Saucy in his book Rulers of Evil said, these are the rulers of evil. And the reason they're allowed to stay there is because let's just talk about our country. The American people, the majority, want it that way. They're ruling people who accept this. And that's what many people don't understand. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of good people in this country. But if you really get down to the basics, do they really understand where this all comes from, both in a spiritual and a secular way? No. And that's why people who preach both the Antichrist in Rome and the Rome and Vatican control, the Jesuit deceit behind our country, get persecuted, because this secret can never be let out. Because if the people understood this, these rulers of evil would have nowhere to go. So people like Tony Alamo in the Alamo Ministry, who've been telling us this for God knows how many years, 40 years, are sitting in prison now for 175 years, while you have a president and a first lady who have committed hundreds of felonies and crimes to the worst degree, treason, and are being considered to sit in the White House again. We'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Have a good evening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.